On this episode of Building Men, buffering. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Meralda. The Building Men podcast was created to help you become the most extraordinary version of yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. Today we're going to be talking about buffering. And so before I get into buffering, just a little bit of a backstory. I found a podcast called The Alpha Male Coach, I want to say November, December of 2019, back before our world went to hell in a handbag. But I started listening to the Alpha Male Coach podcast, and the host of the podcast, his name is Kevin Ayo. And he has this idea called the universal truth. I might spend some time in a future podcast just kind of explaining how he frames that idea of the universal truth. But today I'm going to be talking about buffering. So on his podcast, he does a few episodes about this idea. So think about a buffer as, I would almost say it's almost like a vice or an addiction. A buffer is something that basically holds you back from achieving a goal. It could be health, fitness, career, finance, relationship with yourself, with others. Basically, it kind of stops you from showing up as your best self. So what is a buffer? It could be alcohol, drugs, porn, video games, gambling, social media. It's something that you are using as a substitute to experience or to feel through the circumstances that are occurring in your life. It acts as this shield that you put up so you don't have to feel a negative emotion. So a little bit more about buffering. What buffering is it, think about it this way. It has, and the way that Kevin Ayo explains it, it has a net negative impact on your life. And what that means is that it kind of builds up, it has a buildup of this negative impact on your life. So when you drink, it might be great to go out and have a couple beers or whatever, but it's when it starts having a negative impact as far as, it gets in the way of relationships in your life, or hangovers that are associated with it, or you're missing work, or you're not showing up as your best version of yourself. That's a net negative impact. Overeating, if you enjoy, the cheesy poofs and snacky cakes every once in a while, sure. But if it's becoming something that is getting in the way of you being the best version of yourself, then it's a buffer. So it has a net negative impact. It acts as an opportunity for you, or something that makes you avoid positive self-development in your life. It has this effect of being over-desired and a lack of control on your part for whatever the buffer is. The actions of a buffer, they have unintended results for you. And it basically serves to make you avoid uncomfortable emotions and situations. So just think about your life right now and think about if you have anything that's acting as a buffer. And I mentioned a few before. And so if there is something that's kind of getting in the way of you showing up as your best self, one, to identify, is there something there? Is there something that you're doing, or an activity or something that's going on that is preventing you from showing up as your best version? And if there is, try to think about why. What is the reason that it's existing? So if it's video games, if you find yourself really relying on that escapism of video games, and you're playing a couple hours of video games a day, why are they there? What need is that meeting for you that you're kind of escaping into that world and playing video games? If it's drugs, why are you doing the drugs? What is it about that you're escaping from in your life? If it's alcohol, listen, if you go out and you have a couple beers with some buddies, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about if you're using alcohol to buffer you feeling a certain emotion or specific emotion. If it's watching porn, is it that you're avoiding the feelings of a real relationship or being with a person? Are you avoiding getting in touch with yourself to understand about your own emotions? Is it is it gambling? Are you addicted to that where it's getting in the way of relationships in your life, or you being the best version of yourself? So the first thing is to figure out like why it's there. Then the way that I started to think about it was what's the feeling that happens right before you're going to a buffer to meet that need in your life? What is happening to, like, what's going on in your head right before you start drinking? What's going on in your head right before you start overeating? What's going on in your head immediately before you start watching porn? And that's where you have to do the work. That's where you have to figure out why are you reaching out in that direction, and what need are you meeting? Then it's, do you want to stop? Is this something that in your life is getting in the way of you being the best version of yourself? And if it is, do you want to remove that buffer from your life? When you do, and when you're able to rid yourself of that, it has a couple effects that are pretty powerful effects. It gives you the ability to create desire in a way that could result in a positive impact in your life. Typically, a buffer is you're shielding yourself from something, and the net results are not positive. So when you remove buffers from your life, if that's what you want to do, if you want to remove these buffers from your life, the net result is desire in another direction. So it could be you showing up more in relationships, one with yourself, with family, with friends, with loved ones, in your business. You're showing up as your best self. The other thing that it does is it really frees up a lot of time. Think about if you have things in your life that you would consider a buffer, how much time it takes. If you're spending a lot of time on social media right now, just kind of scrolling through mindlessly on social media, that could be considered a buffer. It also could be considered, where you're looking for that dopamine hit of whatever it is, that quick dopamine hit that makes your brain feel like, oh, this is great, and then once it goes away, you have this void or lacking in your life, and then you're looking to fill it with another buffer, or to increase the intensity of the buffer, whatever it is, be it alcohol, be it overeating, video games, social media, whatever it is. Increasing the intensity or the amount of time that you're spending doing it to get that same level of stimulation. Think about it this way as well. When you're using a buffer to shield yourself from emotion, if you're able to remove that from your life, the amount of time that you free up, it's really amazing. Think about this in this way. I had a conversation with a couple people this week about the idea of kind of how you segment your day. Let's say you're awake for 16 hours a day, and of those 16 hours a day, 8 or 9 hours are spent on your profession, your career. You have, 7 or 8 hours that you use for, taking care of yourself, your family, things that your basic responsibilities. Now, with the time that's left after that, these, the discretionary hours that you have, kind of your quote unquote free time. Think about how you use that free time. So say, for example, if you really think about it, say you have 5 hours every day that you can use how you want to use. Of those 5 hours, I try to think about my free hours in terms of, in a 1 hour time span, I have 6 10-minute clips of time. And in those 10-minute clips of time, you can get a lot accomplished. in a 10-minute time frame, I can do a meditation. I can create something. I could write. I could get a 10-minute training session. I could do as many push-ups as I can do in a 10-minute time frame. I could do as many squats as I can do in 10 minutes. I can go for a jog. I can sprint for 10 minutes. So when you think about the amount of time that it frees up when you're not buffering, when you're looking at something on social media, when you're playing video games, when you're overeating, when you're mindlessly doing something, watching TV or binging TV shows or whatever the case may be, the time it goes by and you don't even realize it. So you might spend 2 hours playing video games, and during that 2 hours, you could have gotten a lot of productive things done for yourself, for your relationships with other people, for a business idea that you have, something that's really creative. And when you're spending time not connected to yourself and there's a buffer that's kind of taking the place, you're not the best version of yourself when there's a buffer that exists. Just to bring closure to this episode, of buffer, it's something that acts as a shield, and it prevents you or stops you from feeling emotions. Most of the time you're trying to avoid feeling some type of a negative emotion instead of just feeling through it. You're using it as a substitute to experience something, to feel through an emotion or a circumstance. It has a net negative effect on your life. It stops you from self-development. It's something that's over-desired, and you exhibit a lack of control when you're thinking about this buffer. The actions are creating unintended results for you, and it's making you avoid uncomfortable situations. And when you can remove these from your life, if you're interested in removing them from your life, you can start to create more desire in other positive areas of your life, yourself, relationships, business, creativity, and you're more able to show up as your best version of yourself. Again, the information that I got from this website, I kind of took it from a podcast that I was listening to called The Alpha Male Coach, and the host name is Kevin Ayo. I will put a link to his podcast in the show notes. If you haven't done so already, please consider following me on Instagram. I try to post something there every single day. I try to make it motivational in nature and try to focus on whatever topic I'll be speaking about on that week's podcast. Also, email me at buildingmencoach@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, or you just want to let me know what you're thinking about the most recent podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time on Building Men.